Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another book review video. And by that I mean it's Ryan's book club. That's what I do here. I sometimes talk about books that I've read. Yeah, so I've got five more books for you today. And if I'm doing the math correctly, this video should come out in December. So I have some really good books that I don't know if it'll be too late for, but if any of these books interest you, I think that they would be pretty good gifts for someone or for yourself if that's something that you're interested in. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first book that I have on my list for today is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And The Naturals is a very I believe it is technically young adult, but it is an enjoyable read nonetheless. Not saying that young adult books can't be enjoyable. I'm just saying, sometimes if you're in your 20s like I am, they can be a little bit out of, or you can be a little bit out of touch, I can say. So, but I do truly enjoy The Naturals. Sometimes I just want kind of like a bit of a cheesier book, and that's why I picked The Naturals. And it wasn't cheesy, but it was still enjoyable. So this is the first book in a series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and I have to be honest with you, I'm not sure if I am going to or want to read the rest of the series, and that's not because this book is bad. It's actually because this book is good. Some people said that it got a little bit bland after the first book, so I might not read any more than this because I felt that this book was a good end. It was a good one and done story, and while I am interested in the characters and I am curious to know where their kind of lives and stories go from this point forward, I do feel that if this were a standalone book, I would not be upset at all and I'd be quite content with what I was given. So the first main thing I want to talk about is the fact that I just really liked the characters a lot. The main character, Cassie, is a very compelling lead. Basically, I forgot to mention this, but the way that this book is kind of advertised, and it's true, is that it's sort of Criminal Minds, but with teenagers, or yeah, I guess they're teenagers, but young adults, kind of. It is Criminal Minds with young adults. It is the exact same bureau. I forget what I genuinely I forget what part they are of, but it's the same thing as the show. So the main character, Cassie, is a naturally gifted one of these teenagers that just is really good at this thing that she's doing. And each of the teens, I believe there are five of them, are a natural, which is why it's called The Naturals. They're naturally just good at this stuff, and they kind of pick up on things that even super well trained members of their field kind of struggle to do, even with a bunch of training. You kind of see a bit of a plot thread where people seem to be a little bit jealous and tend to look down upon the teens because they haven't had the training, but they're still just as good, if not better, than some of these people that have gone through years of, training and schooling to kind of pick it up. So Cassie is one of these people, and she is naturally gifted and good at kind of Cassie is a profiler. That's what they call her. So she's able to make profiles of people, and what's interesting in here is that there are two profilers in the group, and she seems to be more suited towards profiling victims, and she doesn't seem to be as good at picking out or profiling the actual unsub, as they call it. Cassie is more the victim, and the other guy, I believe his name is Dean, is more toward the unsub. So I really enjoyed Cassie. I think that she has an interesting and compelling story. It kind of starts with her not really feeling like she belongs in her family because, long story short, her mother was killed, or at least to her knowledge, her mother was killed, and her father was, um, I think, just left or is gone in some capacity. So she ends up living with, I believe, her father's family. And her father's not in the picture, but that's where she ends up living. And she feels kind of out of sorts and like she doesn't really belong. And she is eventually picked up by these people that are with the FBI, and they are trying to build this team of naturals, of naturally gifted teenagers to kind of help with cases. At this point, they're only working on cold cases, but eventually the goal is to have them work on active investigations. So I like Cassie's struggles, and I like the different things that drive her. And I also really like the side characters. I already briefly brought up Dean. Dean is the other profiler. I think he's interesting. He has a good backstory. I would like to see his character fleshed out a little bit more, but it was still pretty good. There's also Michael, Leah, and Sloan, and I think the three of them are great as well. They all have, their own fun personalities, and I like how they interact with each other, and it's sort of like a fun found family type of thing. But I do wish that the plot was a little more exciting earlier on. It does take some time to kind of get going, and I do appreciate the beginning because it does set up Cassie and her backstory and some of the characters. But I do think that it takes its time a little bit, and it does get a little bit uninteresting, and I wish that it would do a little bit more in the beginning, I think. But ultimately, I did enjoy the villain, and I did enjoy the plot of the villain, and I like what that has to go for it. But again, that's kind of not something that really comes into play until a little bit later in the book, so you don't really get much of that earlier on, which I would have liked because I think that that is one of the most interesting parts of the book. And also the other main issue I have is that there's a love triangle with Cassie, Dean, and Michael, and love triangles just aren't my personal thing. I don't like them. I so honest, I do not enjoy a love triangle. It just kind of annoys me. It's not that bad in this book. It's really not. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh, we're gonna do a love triangle. Okay. They're also teenagers at this point, so I do get it. It makes more sense to me for it to be here than it does something with adults. So ultimately, I rated The Naturals 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a very good read, and I might be interested in reading the rest of the series. If any of you have anything to say about how the series progresses, please let me know, because I don't know if I want to continue reading it or not. I'm not sure what my plan is, but if you don't mind, I have to really get into the mind of the next book. I'm really excited for this one. The next book I have is Open Throat by Henry Hoke, or Hoke. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. This is my favorite book in the list. I don't know if it's my, that's kind of difficult for me to say. It is the book that kind of impacted me emotionally the most, and I think it's the most well written, well composed book of the list. I don't know if it is my favorite, but I did rate this one 5 out of 5 stars. I'll say that right off the bat. It's a short read. I got through it in one sitting. It could have been like 4 to 5 hours to finish. It could have been maybe even a little less or a little more. But I did get through it in one sitting, and it was absolutely compelling. It was stunning. So without getting into spoilers, because that's something that I don't really like to do in these, because as much as I like kind of call this a book club, it is also a review, and I want people to have the option to read these with a fresh lens, without having anything really spoiled for them if that interests them. The plot, the basic gist of this book, without spoilers, is that it is from the perspective of a mountain lion or a cougar within California, in Los Angeles. It sounds weird, right? And it maybe is, but it is absolutely, this mountain lion is one of the most interesting characters I've read in a book in a very long time. There's such a unique perspective to be had here with having the viewpoint of a mountain lion living in Los Angeles. And I truly love the way that this book talks about nature and society and the impact of humans on nature. And it is one of the most interesting renditions of that type of story that I've read. For me, I really truly enjoy getting to have a creative outlet that kind of performs this. So I like getting to see this really unique experience from a mountain lion that's sort of based on a real story. Obviously, it's exaggerated and it is not realistic, but it was inspired by a real mountain lion to some degree. But yeah, I really love the way that this book is able to talk about nature and class and the way that people interact with each other from such a from a viewpoint, from a lens that doesn't isn't able to grasp or fully understand these things as much. But I love that because you kind of get to have an understanding of what it might be like for wildlife, for an animal to live through these conditions. And another thing I'll say is that this book is very queer. And I don't necessarily mean that in that, you know, there are two characters that make out and kiss and they are the same sex or gender. What? No, I mean, like, it's very queer, like the concept of queerness where it is, you know, kind of like very open and free and touching and beautiful, and the way that otherness and difference is beautiful in this is truly an incredible concept. And there are genuine, like, I put that in quotes, genuine queer undertones in this. There's like the mountain lion themselves kind of has weird gender feelings and identities about them, and they also have weird feelings toward other wildlife and other beings and other creatures that is very queer. It got to a point, and it could just be because I read this at the right time, because I read this not too long after my dog Roxy passed, where it truly, it will break your heart, but in the most beautiful fashion that you will see. Not, I mean, there are other books that do things beautifully as well. I don't mean that like this is the most beautiful thing I've ever read. But I do mean that this is beautiful and it's a beautiful story and it might break your heart, and I definitely cried, which is, you know, not something you're expecting when you go into reading a little short book about a mountain lion living in Los Angeles. But that's where it led me, and I absolutely loved it. So let's open my throat and start talking about the next book. Well, sound the alarm, everybody. This is the first graphic novel I've covered in this series, which at this point is what, 25 books now? So this is the first graphic novel. I do read a decent amount of graphic novels and manga. I just don't really include them that often because they're truly just guilty pleasure most of the time for me, and a lot of them tend to not have that deep of a plot, or they're sequels to something, or they're part of a long running serialization. So I just haven't really included them, but this one I felt I needed to because it is so distinct and so gorgeous that I really wanted to talk about it, and that is On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. So the main thing I absolutely loved about this one is that the art is phenomenal. It's truly gorgeous. I like that it's in color. It's a beautiful piece of art, but this is like it's pretty beautiful, and every page is kind of just like a whoa. I could picture that being like my desktop wallpaper or something. But also the world building is really special. It kind of takes place in like a science fiction space universe where Earth does exist. It's there, but it's only mentioned, it's only referenced, and we're kind of just in the galaxy, in the solar system. There's a bunch of different colonies and space laws and stuff like that that are unique and interesting, and I really enjoyed the world building and the different places that it takes you and the different cultures that it shows off. I thought it was quite fun in that regard. I also really enjoy the characters. The main character is Mia, but I also really liked Elliot. Mia has a relationship in this book with another girl named Grace, and their relationship is really compelling. And I don't know, one of my gripes is I don't know how satisfying it was at the end. It was good, but I feel like it could have been more satisfying, if that makes any sense. But I still enjoyed it, and I like their relationship a lot. There are two other characters, I mean, there are more characters, but there are two other characters that I really enjoyed, and they are Alma and Char, but they are in a relationship. They're lesbian lovers. You get this really cute and really adorable family out of these people, and it's just one of those beautiful reads that you go through and you're like, wow, I'm just glad that I got to read this and set my eyes upon it. The main issues that I had is that the plot is a little confusing at first, and that's because certain segments of this novel are split between the past and the present. In the beginning, it was difficult for me to fully tell them apart in how, like, which characters are which. I feel like the initial setup of the characters and their names is not that helpful to me in my brain to be like, oh, this is this character recognizably. I got it now. And so the past and the present are kind of difficult to tell apart in the beginning because the art style doesn't change that much for the characters depending on whether they're in the past or the present, even though there's a time difference. And so I was kind of confused, like, is this person this person? Is this the past or the present? And I think that just a little bit of differentiation and like structure modifications would have helped make that more obvious to me. But regardless, I did eventually pick up on it better, and I did enjoy it once it got to that point. I mean, I enjoyed it beforehand too, but it was more just like me having to put things together a little bit more. Ultimately, I do think that the plot itself is a little bit generic, but I do like it, and I like the way that it ends, and I like the things that the characters have to deal with. Some of the characters feel not as useful or as important, and that's a little bit of a shame because they're special and I can see what they have going for them, but there isn't really enough time for them to fully get what I think they could have. If you're looking for a graphic novel that is beautiful, has queer plot, has just like an enjoyable, cutesy at times, adorable little moments with also some serious and heartfelt moments, I think you'll enjoy this one, and I rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And now it's time for me to ride the Sunbeam all the way into the galaxy and then land on the planet that is the next book. Sorry, I kind of lost the plot there. Okay, so these next two books are very special and very important to me. These are the reasons why I didn't say outright that Open Throat was my favorite. While I did rate that one the highest, this next book that I'm going to talk about might just be my favorite because of everything it has going for it, and it's kind of more my type of book. So this is a duology, and the first book is The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. Aiden Thomas is a trans author, and the first book that I read of his was Cemetery Boys, and I absolutely loved Cemetery Boys, and that's a book that I will hopefully cover eventually. Full disclosure, I did read The Sunbearer Trials a while ago. I read it before I started the book club series, and I'm bringing it in now because I read the sequel book. And I didn't want to talk about the sequel without talking about the first book, so I'm going to be talking about the first book. Spoiler free. However, when I talk about the next book, I will be including spoilers for this one. So if you don't want spoilers for the Sunbearer Trials, skip the last next book that I have. Okay? All right. So this was truly almost a perfect read for me. I absolutely adore Aiden Thomas's writing. I think the thing that I like most about his books are his characters. He has a knack for creating some of the most lovable characters I've seen, and I mean, it doesn't hurt that they're queer as fuck. I do really enjoy the characters that Aiden Thomas puts on the page, and they're just great. I love them. I think the first thing that truly stood out to me about this book is the world building and the setting, because I think the way that this book was advertised is kind of like Hunger Games meets Percy Jackson, but it's, instead of Greek mythology, it's based on specifically Mexican mythology, and it draws on, you know, Aztec and Mayan cultures, and it's just so fucking cool, guys. So there are these gods, and they kind of have their own cities, and they take care of their own cities, and each city is unique, each god is unique, god or goddess, and there are demigods like Percy Jackson, and the main character is a demigod, and it's a really fun, unique world that I also love because it is built in queerness. And what I mean by that is that to be queer is completely normal. And I love that because some of these books will take queerness and then that will kind of be what is at fault for, or it's the cause, it's the relationship that affects things to be kind of bad. In this world, queerness is inherent in the culture, it is a part of the world, and I absolutely love reading that because it's not something that I'm used to. So right off the bat, the main character Teo is he is trans himself. Because of his unique demigodhood, he does experience dysphoria, because he is the son of oh, I forget her name, the goddess of the birds. And so he has wings, but like in real life, birds tend to be like, their colors tend to be based on their sex, male or female. So if you look at a male bird, they'll tend to be more vibrant and colorful than the females. Because Teo was born as a female, he has the plumage or the colors of a bird that would be female, and so that causes him dysphoria and distress. And I really think that that's such a like a unique way to create, to like put, to build this into a world that is just so chock full of like interesting stories. But yeah, there's also a very interesting class, sort of class divide among the gods, even, because there are jades, there are golds, and there are obsidians. The obsidians are not really at play. They were banished a long time ago because they basically didn't give a fuck about the humans. And then the golds are kind of seen as like the superior, better gods, and then the jades are like, they're still gods. They're still very widely respected, especially within their own cities and towns. But, you know, if you're looking at a gold versus a jade, people are going to be like, well, the gold's better. They're more powerful, they're more special, whatever. So I really enjoyed that unique class divide, and it plays a very important role in the main event of this book, which is where the Hunger Games comes into play. And that is every X amount of years, I don't remember how many, the Sunbearer Trials are held, which basically means these group of demigods are forced to compete, and at the end, whoever loses is going to be sacrificed by the winner, so that they can basically keep the sun alive. And the sun is Sol, the goddess. It's very interesting, and that's why this classified is compelling, especially in this aspect of the book, because usually I don't think a jade has ever really won the Sunbearer Trials, but Teo, a jade demigod, is selected to be a part of these games. And so is another Jade demigod who is also trans. And also, I think the youngest out of the group, his name is Shio, spelt Xio. I believe that's how you pronounce it. If I'm mispronouncing it, I apologize, and please let me know the correct pronunciation. But yeah, so there's 2 Jades and a whole bunch of gold demigods. And so they kind of have to, fight with being discriminated against a little bit, being quote unquote less powerful, and it's really interesting. As I've said, Teo is a great character. I absolutely love Teo as just a protagonist, as a character in general. The main thing that I love about Teo is that he is such a loving, caring person, but he truly cares about people and everything and nature in the world. And so when he sees that this young trans Jade is also selected to be part of the games, even though he is already at a disadvantage because he is a Jade and he is not part of the academy, which is a place that trains all the golds because the Jades aren't allowed to fucking join or something. He's at a disadvantage. Even though he knows that, he still recognizes that this other younger Jade, Shio, is even at a greater disadvantage. So he's like, I'm going to take you under my wing, I guess kind of literally because he has wings, and be like, listen, we're going to work together and we're going to get through this and we are going to survive. We're not going to be in last place. And then the other main part of this group is Nia. She is a gold demigod, but she is Teo's best friend. She's also really great. I love her. And so this little trio kind of forms an alliance during these games, and they get to work and have a lot of fun. And then the other demigods are also great. They're also interesting. There are really two or three main standouts: Aurelio, Aristella, and Osilo. They're also great and enjoyable, and if you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. They're good. They're great too. I mean, let's talk about the main event. The game itself, the Sunbearer Trials themselves, are absolutely challenging and kind of terrifying, and they are a genuinely exciting part of this book to read. They actually make you worried. You're like, oh my god, are they going to be able to pull this off? And it's really great. And yeah, then I can't talk much more because I mean the Sunbearer Trials happen. You get through all of them in this book. And I can't talk about the ending because that would be spoilers. And I don't even want to hint at how it ends because I think it's great. If you're interested, please read it. Aiden Thomas is a great author. I love his work, and I really, truly love the Sunbearer Trials. I rated it 4.75 out of 5 stars. Like I said, nearly perfect for me, but it is time for me to spread my wings and finally talk about the last and final book of this video. And also, there will be spoilers. Okay, so the final book I have is Celestial Monsters, the final book in this duology by Aiden Thomas, and this one I did actually read recently. I will say I didn't enjoy it as much as Sunbearer Trials. Also, like, I love the Sunbearer Trials so much that I got a shirt. It's right here. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but it is Teo in gold as wearing a little crown, and it's great. And well, actually, I can speak spoilers now as the Sunbearer because Teo wins. Teo is the Sunbearer, and the person who comes in last is Aristella, like the best, largely considered to be the best gold in this trial. Huh? It's kind of incredible. That twist ending truly shook me, and the fact that Shio ended up being a traitor and an obsidian was fucking crazy. And then they bring about the apocalypse. How interesting. You've got me hooked, Aiden Thomas. How could you? Again, sadly, I didn't enjoy this one as much. I still think it's absolutely great. My main gripe is that it starts a little bit slow And I think that's because we get Shio perspective chapters in this, much like in Heroes of Olympus, we get different character perspective chapters. We get that with Teo and Shio in this book. The main problem is that I do really like Shio's chapters, especially towards the end. I like segments of their chapters, but there are parts also that drag a little bit, that are kind of more like, it is what it is. I don't know if I care that much. It's fine. It is mostly only like that in the beginning of the book, and then it gets better, and it picks up, and it gets more compelling. Another thing, the Sunbearer Trials themselves were phenomenal, and it's kind of hard to beat them because that truly was special. As a substitute, so to speak, this book does not have trials, but it has these giant celestial monsters that rain down from the sky because the obsidians are free and they let loose the monsters. And so they have to deal with the monsters in this book instead of different trial challenges and whatnot. And while I do think those action sequences are great and they're really cool, they're just not as compelling. Sadly, I think it's hard to be as compelling as the trials were, just because they're such an event. In that regard, I do not enjoy this book as much, but it is still very enjoyable and very good. And I think the part that kind of was the most enjoyable to me in this one was the dynamic between Teo, Nia, and Aurelio. The three of them are basically the main quest goers. They have to go and free the people and basically save the day and stop the apocalypse. And I really enjoy their companionship, and I like that it's not all sun and daisies for them. They have their own struggles. They have their own little moments of tension within the group, and it makes for really compelling character development. And I really like the relationship that they get to share and build throughout this book, and it is truly something special. I also think that the Obsidians are a really great threat. I think that they're quite the compelling threat. I like that there is a story to be told with them where it's like, yes, they are evil, but you can kind of, to some degree, understand where they're coming from, and that goes especially so for Shio as an Obsidian demigod who, has to fucking deal with trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong and who they are, because they kind of have an identity crisis because they were raised by Mala Suerte as a son of Mala Suerte, when in reality they're actually the son of Vengaza, an Obsidian. And so they have all these difficulties going on, and they were always kind of treated poorly for being a Jade, and kind of seen as a weaker one at that, because they were a son of Mala Suerte, who is usually seen as not that important or not that strong. And I really like their development. They have great development. I think the other most interesting part of this to me truly is that whole concept of class again. Whereas before it was more a gold versus jade type thing, now we have obsidians kind of showcasing the worst side of what godhood can have, and we also have really compelling stories of humans versus demigods versus gods, and how that dynamic kind of leads to certain class and economic structures that really affects people. And I like that we get to see that, and there are genuine good critiques of real life shit and real life rulers and ruling systems that obviously is not word for word, but it's more allegorical. And I really like the story that it has to tell. The ending is, I also think, quite special. It did take me by surprise. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but I really enjoyed it nonetheless. Well, I really enjoyed it Because whatever, man, you get what I'm trying to say, hopefully. So yeah, I rated Celestial Monsters 4.5 out of 5 stars, but if you're looking for a short little duology to read that's very queer, I highly recommend this one. It's special. I brought you a bunch of good books in my opinion, and so if you want to read any of them, if you want to look into them, I think that's great. And if you've read any of them, what did you think about them? I'm always curious to know what people are thinking, and if you have any recommendations for me, I'm always looking. I love reading. I love books. Let me know, and I'll take a little gander. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.